When our children attend daycare or preschool or school in another language than that or those we speak at home, we tend to wonder which language we should be supporting. It seems obvious that we keep supporting our home language or languages. But the school language will become more important for our children for many reasons, and many parents think that the exposure to the school language will be enough at school. Well, not really, at least not for a longer period of time. Multilingual families have then this double pleasure or challenge to support all the languages they can that our children need. I talk about this extensively in my webinars and consultations, and I'd like to share some insights with you from a webinar I held at Ute's International Language Academy. Participants joined from all over the world, from the US, Lebanon, Iceland, Netherlands, the UK, Spain, France, and Germany. And the age range of their children spanned from 8 months to 16 years. And not all parents speak their children's daycare or school language. Now, the title of the webinar was How to Support Multilingual Children in the Daycare and School Language at Home Without Compromising Our Home Languages. Let's start with illustrating the many different scenarios of multilingual families. I always say it is a continuum of increasing complexity. For example, we can speak language purple at home and language yellow in the community or at school or at work. Maybe we also speak language green at home and also language orange in the community. When we parents speak two different languages to our children, we speak also a third one among us parents, for example, language blue. And when our children start attending daycare or school in the language yellow, we usually start also welcoming, let's just say, using this language also at home. To continue this, we are sometimes lucky that at least one of our home languages, let's say the language blue, is also used in the community or maybe also at school. You see how colorful it can be, and it can become even more complex than that. How our languages can be used in different settings and how these can also overlap sometimes. And this is actually what it is about. It is about finding out how to use these overlappings to our and our children's advantage. Now, the participants of this webinar used 1 to 3 languages at home, and only a few indicated that one of their home languages is also the school language. I would now like to draw your attention to some studies that have been done and that, from a research perspective, help us understand what can possibly be effective when using multiple languages on a regular basis for our children. I will try to translate it into practice and see how we can adapt it to our individual situations. Now, like Jim Cummins observed and repeated many times over the last almost 40 years, a child's second language competence is dependent in part on the level of competence the child has already attained in the first language or languages. I use also the plural because many of our children are exposed to multiple languages before starting to attend daycare or school. Let's use a scenario where we have 2 home languages, green and blue, and 1 daycare or school language, which is orange. What you see here is what has been described and analyzed extensively by research. This means when our children started daycare or school at a moment where their competence of the language or the home language was already high, or let's say was more or less at the level expected for a child of their age group. And we know that home language skills can be transferred to school, and translanguaging practices can be very efficient. Now, one important point is when our children start attending daycare or school in the additional language. Another scenario which has not been covered by research yet, and I sincerely hope it will be addressed very soon, is the one that is way more frequent in multilingual families. And this is when the child starts attending daycare in an additional language before being verbal or orally speaking, let's just say articulating words in the home language. This means that the home languages need to be supported even more because the input in the home language decreases due to the child spending more time in the daycare or community language. For this group, what Jim Cummins said when focusing on the school needs to be rephrased to skills learned in the school language can be transferred to the home languages, so the other way around. From this, we can learn that no matter when our children start being exposed to the additional language or languages, transfer in either way is possible. Now, when they attend daycare or school in another language, we can observe a temporary plateauing, an apparent halt or stagnation of development in the home language during the first weeks or months at daycare or school in an additional or new language. And when our children cease replying to us in our home languages, we actually should take action. The reason for this shift in language use is because the focus is more on the school language, which increases relatively fast and consistently, because our children need to be able to function in that language. They need to be able to follow the lesson, whereas the home language use and need will feel less urgent and necessary. If we want our children to keep using our language, our home languages, maybe also learn to read and write in them, we have to find ways to keep our children motivated. Especially when the school or the community does not support the home language or languages and our children are showing signs that they feel less confident speaking it, that's where we have to take action at home. Now today, more and more schools are aware of the importance to support and validate the home languages at school too, and they know that for multilingual children to be successful in the school language, they also need to feel confident in using their other languages too in order to develop them all in a harmonious way. And this would be actually the ideal situation. Schools tend to be more open to respond also to the needs of multilingual families. Nevertheless, not all teachers are aware of what this all entails. So when we parents observe that there is a clear difference in language use and competence, we need to find ways to support our children, make sure that their abilities are seen and taken into consideration. It is a two-way street, like I mentioned before. What an ideal school would be doing, what a language-friendly school environment would look like, is described by Jim Cummins again. Classroom instruction should encourage students to use their full linguistic repertoire in flexible and strategic ways as a tool for cognitive functioning and academic learning. This would be the ideal situation at school that also uses translanguaging practices, which means that teachers intentionally guide students to use all of their linguistic abilities. Teachers can, for example, ask children to look for information about the topic in their home languages, and maybe also to read and write texts in their home languages. It is an opportunity for the children and the teachers to foster both the home and school languages. And a nice side effect of this for both the teacher and the child is to gain more intercultural competence. Now, translanguaging practice requires the teacher to know what the child is capable of. Does the child know the terms in his or her home languages? Is the child able to read and write in the home language? In my experience, when the home language is not part of the curriculum at school, children tend to lag behind, sometimes 2 or more years with their reading and writing skills in their home languages. So it is even more important for the teacher to know what the competence level of the child is, so that the child is not feeling inadequate, not enough in the home language, which can have very negative effects on his or her confidence, self-perception, and identity with regards to the home language and culture. Reading and writing skills can be transferred between different languages, but neither parents nor teachers should ever assume that this happens naturally without further support. Many multilingual families struggle with this, and I help parents find the best solution for their children. Now, I have translated this a bit for what we multilingual families can do at home. Children should be given the opportunity to share their full linguistic repertoire in flexible and strategic ways as a tool for cognitive functioning and general learning. For our children, this means to use their school language and home languages to consolidate their learning. We should create the same language-friendly environment that we desire for our children at school, at home too. This is even more important if the school is not that supportive toward our home languages. Now, one way we can try to make this transfer between home and school happen is by using the scaffolding method. In building terms, scaffolding refers to a platform that is temporarily set up to aid builders. It gives them elevation and support. In education, the mental image and symbolism is very similar. So in school or informal setting, teachers act as activators who help their students master a new concept and make sure to elevate the knowledge of the child, and it's what actually teaching is about. So with scaffolding, we refer to a method where teachers offer a particular kind of support to children or students as they learn and develop a new concept or skill. Let me quickly illustrate what teachers usually do when scaffolding. They break the task into smaller steps to meet the children where they actually stand in order to elevate their knowledge and foster their learning. They also verbalize the process. They might give an outline or name the different steps so that it is clear what is expected. And they will promote cooperative learning. This is, of course, in the classroom setting where children have more or less the same level of competence in the target language and can do similar tasks. This cooperative learning fosters also a dialogue, conversation, and exploration of what is being taught. Teachers can use prompts, and they also share knowledge, tips, and background knowledge and invite children or students to do the same. So this is what can be done at school. Now, we parents are not teachers, and not all parents are teachers. And even if we are, we might not want to wear both hats with our children. What we can do is, first of all, know when to focus on language or any other skill. Can be maths, geography, history, science, anything. So if our children are tired, upset, in a hurry, or we are, it's not the right moment. Choose the right moment to focus on the task. And then focus on a few terms only. When our children come home with word lists, for example, to learn, break it down to small steps, small chunks. Choose a few words per day and repeat them over the week. 10 minutes is a lot for a 3-year-old, and 10 minutes for a 10-year-old is actually better than nothing. Focus on short chunks that are effective instead. The next point is modeling. Children learn best, or we all learn best, by example or by experience what we learn. When we model problem solving, we can say, well, how can I find the right word or topic with what I have at home? How can I explain it in the homework? Try to keep a vocabulary and a dictionary on the coffee table to use whenever you or your child are looking for new words, meanings, and different uses of words. Show them that you also have to look up words and terms that you too are constantly learning. The next point is leverage prior knowledge. This means, what does my child know about the topic or the concept in the school language? And can we talk about it in the home language too? Find more information about it. And why not? What can my child teach me about the topic using the school language? My children attended school in my, chronologically speaking, 4th and their 5th language. And this language became and is now their strongest language. So we were and are constantly exploring terms and concepts. And furthermore, what I learned about many of the topics has changed so much over time. And what my children are learning now is so different that I'm learning thanks to them. So I might add, leverage their and your very own prior knowledge and use those moments to consolidate not only their, but also your very own knowledge. With leveraging what our children already know in the school language, we can help them anchor it, so to say, link it to how this is said in and explored in our home language too. For them to be able to also retrieve then the information, the term, the concept, the context, also later on when they need it. Some of the parents who attended the webinar said that they don't speak the school language, and I added yet, because it is a unique chance for us to learn alongside our children. We don't need to know all the details and learn everything our children are learning. That would be a lot and not very realistic. But we can choose some aspects, some subjects that we are curious about and let our children teach us for a change. We parents are not omniscient. We don't know everything. And that is an important lesson our children can learn from us, that adults don't know everything and that the learning process never ends. And we can actually make this a very interesting and enjoyable experience of learning. So you see, it's not always only about language. I'm always very curious about what my children learn that I don't know yet, but well, that's me. The next point is to verbalize the process and listen to our children. I find this always very challenging because on one side we should provide a rich input in our home language or in the language that we're using with our children. On the other side, we should be giving more space and time for our children to use the language, whether the school or the home language, in order to convey their thoughts, talk about, for example, the process that leads them to solve an equation. But only through listening we can find out what our children understand and what they are struggling with or what we can help them with. It also pretty much depends on each person's communication style. I'm very chatty, but my child might not be. So I need to find a way to optimize the communication between us by also using different languages sometimes. And that's also when we can explore the vocabulary. Look for synonyms, antonyms, using the concept in different contexts, but without exaggerating. If a child is tired, it's better to keep it simple. We can also use visuals. We can use posters, signs on the street for some aspects, or also mental images, memories. Some of us learn better when words are not only used, so spoken, but also written, and maybe concepts are also visual in graphics or pictures. And again, time is key. Not only the right time, but also the time frame we have. This might seem very time consuming, but it doesn't need to be. At home, we can keep it simpler and focus on the child. And if a child seems bored, we can try to use a surprise factor by altering the voice or doing some silly things. Now, I haven't focused on a particular language as every family situation is different and deserves an individual solution. But we want to focus on what a child can do, praise the effort, involve the child in problem solving, and keep the whole environment positive. So avoid competition, especially among siblings, for example. And if you feel overwhelmed or impatient, change the subject or room or moment. I always suggest to consider it like a collaboration with a long-term goal. To have, for example, a vocabulary or knowledge to the extent that our child needs the language. It's not about who is quicker, better, faster. It's about making and taking steps. I would like to end with a continuum I drafted where I invite you to choose what you think you can do, maybe right now, to support the school language at home. We can start, for example, with reading in the school language with our children, especially when we learn the school language alongside our children. We can take this opportunity to learn reading with them in the school language. And it gives also our children a great boost of confidence when they see us make the effort to learn their school language. And it has also other advantages. We can also use the school language occasionally when they do homework, when we assist them, which is what many schools expect parents to do. And at some point, we may want to use the school language in specific moments when talking about a topic that our child needs to study for a test or hold a presentation about. So it would be adopting the time and place strategy in addition to other language strategies we already adopt in our family. Fact is that if our children receive input in the school language only at school, it is not enough when they are older, especially. If we can't provide opportunities to use the school language, maybe a nanny, an au pair, a neighbor, a friend, or someone else in our multilingual village can do that. We can also bridge the school language and home language by using translanguaging. So talk about different topics in the school language and then continue this conversation in the home language so that our children can have heard the concepts and can retrieve the information or knowledge when they need it. If you're looking for activities or ideas to foster any language at home, I invite you to explore my YouTube channel and the one I share with Annalisa and Yoshito, where we show ways to make speaking, reading, and writing our languages more fun. It's called Activities for Multilingual Families. And if you wish to participate in my free online webinars, find the link in the description or the QR code here. Should you be interested in learning how to raise your children with multiple languages successfully, I have also a course for parents of 0 to 4-year-olds in my academy, and others for parents of 4 to 10-year-olds is coming soon, as well as the one for 10 to 15-plus-year-olds. In conclusion, whenever we see that our children tend to use one language more than the other for a longer period of time, we can encourage them to increase the use of the latter one and provide opportunities to enjoy the language. I know that we tend to worry if all this is worth it, if we should maybe just focus on one language at a time. For some parents, it's just too much, and I completely understand that. Raising children with multiple languages is a journey with ups and downs. It is a marathon, and we all wish it could be easy, but then I always say everything that requires effort and commitment is worth working for, don't you think? I like to consider it as a family project that we commit to with a partner and our children and the multilingual village that we create. Please let me know how you are supporting your children with their school language, what works for you, what your experience is, and if you like this video, please click subscribe to be notified whenever I publish a new video. And last but not least, make sure to enjoy your languages.